Hi, and welcome to my professional philosophy of health education for the HSC 6037 Philosophies and Principles of Health Education course. So just an overview of my presentation today. I'm going to give you a little introduction into my professional as well as my personal philosophies. Give a little bit of the historical perspective. Again, my personal and professional philosophy is really diving into those concepts. And lastly, the role I will play as a health education specialist. So just thinking about the idea of never working a day in your life, if you love your job, is really kind of rooted in my professional and personal philosophy. So looking at my personal philosophy of health, of life and health. So the attributes that I see for my personal philosophy, which again differs from my professional, but really overlaps, is self-love, self-respect, trust, motivation, and honesty. So the idea of being your best self, this really ties into my professional philosophy, being your best self for you, being your best self for those around you, the environment you're in. And then what really ties my personal philosophy of life and health with my professional, which I will talk about later, is the idea of balance. So I believe that we never really achieve balance, but the journey of getting there is what's most important. So I'm going to really come back to this idea of balance and that journey it takes to find balance. So looking at the historical perspective, so the revolutionary work that was done by the Greeks really lays the foundation for my personal and professional philosophy. So philosophy and science remained a unified whole until the time of Aristotle. So the Greeks, and specifically Hippocrates and Asclepiades, really moved healthcare away from that idea of religion and priests to more rational thought, which guided society to understand health and disease. So they really define health, the Greeks defined it as health as a state of balance between integral and external environmental ideas, which really revolutionize, again, that medical thought. So internal versus external environment. And so Hippocrates really broke down barriers and focused, again, on that idea of balance, which is still the foundation for many philosophies today. And all these ideas are really underlying in my personal philosophy and my professional, as you'll hear about shortly. So just something for my audience, do you think the Greeks' work was something that you see as revolutionary as I do? So do you believe in this idea of science versus religion? Is that really foundation for maybe your understanding? Just something to think about as we continue. So now using current philosophies in my professional philosophy, first is the idea of Rash. So Rash is the philosophy of symmetry, which is defined, as you see, by health being physical, emotional, spiritual, and social components, and each is just as important as the others. So Rash believes that health education specialists should motivate their clients toward this idea of symmetry, or again, of the idea of balance of these components as you see. He believes failure to maintain symmetry through neglect of any aspect of health results in an unbalanced individual. So the idea that if physical, emotional, spiritual, and social components are unbalanced, that this person is an unbalanced individual. So a question again to my listeners is, do you agree with Rash's thoughts on symmetry and balance? So do you believe that if any of these ideas are neglected, that an individual is unbalanced? Just to kind of talk about my professional philosophy and answer that question for me is that I believe in some. You'll see what else I bring into my professional philosophy shortly, but I don't agree that if it's not all balanced, the person is not a balanced individual. Because I do believe in that journey of finding balance. But if we look at the other philosophy that I take into account, Greenberg, and the idea of wellness, or defined as visualized as the integration of spiritual, intellectual, physical, emotional, environmental, and social dimensions of health to form a whole healthy person. So these are the components that Greenberg defines as what it means to be healthy. So the six components as you see on the screen. So using wellness and the philosophy of symmetry, I really do believe in the six components being spirituality, intellectual, physical, emotional, environmental, and social dimensions to create a healthy person. And I understand and agree with the idea of balance and symmetry, but I don't agree that if you are unbalanced, that you will if you are unbalanced in one of these areas, that you are not a healthy person or not balanced. So my question again to the audience is, do you believe that these 6 components define what it means to be healthy? Like I said, I really do. And these both, Rasch and Greenberg, laid the foundation for me. But what do you think are the 6 dimensions? Or maybe there's a few other dimensions that you see to make a healthy person, but just really interesting to think about. So kind of bringing it all together and using all 3 that are listed on the screen. So Rasch, the philosophy of symmetry, plus Greenberg's philosophy of wellness, and the Greeks' idea of balance, really encompasses what my professional philosophy is. So as a health education specialist, I really strive to have each group, person, community, workplace setting, or environment really find dimensions of health in a positive and balanced way. So using the 6 dimensions of health that were listed by Greenberg encompass the way I view that self-care and optimal health. And I really do believe by guiding my priority populations to have that spiritual, intellectual, physical, emotional, environmental, and social dimensions of health, that they will be living their best lives. But tying this back into my personal philosophy of life and health, as well as Rasch and the Greeks, having that overall balance between each of these aspects or the 6 dimensions is really important to me. And also when I talk about the idea of having balance be the journey, but not the end, I recognize this because I think it's important for the patients I serve or the communities I serve to flex dimensions of health. So meaning if one time it's more important for your emotional health to be at the forefront, really flexing that and recognizing that you need to come into tune with those ideas, and maybe putting some of those others not on the back burner necessarily, but just not focusing and not having that symmetry like Rasch says. I also appreciate how the idea of wellness encompasses more than just foundational health principles like Rasch does, but really ties in the idea of finding that journey toward a healthy life. So again, tying in Rasch and the idea of philosophy of symmetry or balance with the Greeks' idea of balance and Greenberg's idea of wellness, I believe that I would be fulfilling my role in serving my communities to live their greatest life as a health education specialist. So my audience, how is your professional philosophy different than mine? Do you use similar ideas of what defines a healthy person, or where do you land on the spectrum? And what philosophies influence your decision? So again, these 3 on the screen influence my professional philosophy, but interested, what influenced yours? So how will I really make an impact how will I make a difference as a health education specialist, So how will I inspire my communities? How will I really make a difference? So the ways I'm going to inspire others as a health education specialist, starting with guiding clients towards that balance and really interventions using my philosophy. So my role in health education is to promote these ideas, and I really plan to inspire my priority populations to feel the same. So I will stay true to my professional philosophy by really having it at the forefront of every conversation, decision, study, or intervention I do. So really guiding my clients toward balance, but also using interventions and having my interventions rooted in theory, evidence-based research, and my philosophy will continue to fuel my idea of health education and really use my philosophy to stay true to those interventions and really promoting what I believe is most true. So moving into the decision-making philosophy. So within my work, I really plan to use a variety of philosophies similar to this. And depending on the scenario, however I see the decision-making philosophy as being the main one I will use. And again, kind of with my ideas of flexing different areas, depending on the scenario and the intervention and the client or community, that really will depend on which I choose. But I do see the decision-making philosophy as one of the main ways I will influence my priority populations to engage in healthy behavior practices. And so looking at the definition of empowering individuals or patients to find the best ways to seek that best approach answer, I will be doing my duty as a health education specialist because I feel like I will be helping my patients or community members really learn how to enhance their lives through resources and actions. And then the final bullet of workplace setting. So my goal is to work in a workplace setting. That's always been the goal. And the reason I kind of joined this master's program and applied is so that I can build those foundational skills to bring back to a workplace. And so using my philosophy, I really plan to emphasize to employees how imperative it is to find balance between the 6 dimensions of health. So I'll use the words of the Greeks and Aristotle, Rasch, Greenberg to really showcase why it is I find how important it is to find balance through implementing workplace interventions, which really focus on each of these dimensions. And again, tying back into the idea of the journey of balance and how important that is when finding that idea of a balanced life or a healthy life. So I know I talked about these 4 main ideas and kind of straight on to others, but to my audience, do you have any other recommendations on how I can inspire others through my work using my philosophy as a health education specialist? Because I'm always open to ideas and would love to hear other ways you think that I could really help my populations. So I'm really excited to continue this journey. So again, this is just my first semester of the master's program, and I really enjoyed taking this course to build my professional philosophy. I'm excited to use my philosophy and guiding principles through different courses, like my workplace wellness course I'm taking this summer, also planning interventions and health communication. It's really important for me to have this philosophy and have this foundation moving into the rest of my courses, because I can continue to keep this true, keep this prevalent in the back of my mind, and really emphasize the ideas of my professional philosophy throughout all the work I plan to do in my master's. So here are the references that I wanted to share. I really thank you for listening to my presentation, and I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit about me and my personal philosophy, as well as my professional philosophy. So thank you. Any questions, please leave in the comments or the discussion. I would love to engage.